So, hi everyone. I'm here today with Nav Bhattacharya, who is the Talent and Learning Director at Amazon Operations, to talk about the future of learn. Nav, thank you so much for finding some time to talk to me about that. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So Nav, maybe the first question, or maybe before we get into the subject matter, can you please tell us a little bit about your background and what you guys are doing? What is your role today at Amazon?
Yeah, sure. So I joined Amazon about 7 years back. I started as pretty much the first guy launching the India learning and talent function when we launched the India operations back in 2014. About 4 years back, I moved to Europe and currently head the learning and talent function for the European operations, the e-commerce operations. And it's been a fascinating journey in the sense that I think Amazon is an amazing place to invent and experiment. Jeff Bezos calls this place the best place to fail. But I think what Amazon also provides from a learning perspective, specifically, the challenge of scale and the number of people that we hire, both at the frontline level as well as at the leadership level. And I think because of this pace of growth and the scale, the challenges are just amazing, in terms of being able to experiment and do some really interesting stuff. I think with scale, I think what we have been able to do is use a lot of tech-enabled solutions, which has helped. But I think unlike a lot of people, what people may think, we also use a lot of non-tech-enabled solutions for scale. And I think I personally learned about how you actually can use just be smart about using non-tech solutions, because I think tech sort of is a fad and not. I mean, both, right? It depends on how you use it, and you don't necessarily always need technical solutions. You could use some really smart people solutions to also scale. So it's been a fascinating journey. I mean, both, like I said, both in the tech as well as non-tech learning solution space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nav. So yeah, and that makes the perfect bridge to the very first question, that is, our industry, the learning industry is being turned upside down with, and the COVID, I think, is kind of accelerating the whole thing, right? And I was wondering from your perspective, what would be the sort of the 3 mega trends that you were seeing that are going to be shaping the future of learning?
Sure, and again, I'm probably coming from the Amazon filter that I see. I think we're seeing, at least in the learning space, while we are social, animals, feedback as well as like the one-to-one touch as managers is only getting critical, right? Especially in the e-commerce operations or like massive people operations space, just being able to connect with other people was difficult pre-COVID. And I think now people also have a reason not to connect with others, because of the social distancing and so on and so forth. And I'm calling this as a trend because it is an effort on part of managers. And I think as learning leaders, we need to figure out ways to make this effort, less effortful. Of course, use tech, but also figure mechanisms that allows leaders to, enjoy those conversations, or in a way that, even though there's distance, how do you be able to reach out to frontline, specifically frontline, because I think if people don't do anything about this relationship with frontline, particularly in our kind of industries, I think we will see, with everything that's happening on the personal side, it will only have these cascading effect at work, and people are only getting fearful and so on and so forth. And I think it's so important that we as learning leaders figure out ways for managers to have, better touch. So I think you know, I personally think that's a big space, and we are hearing this from our leaders across. Like, help us connect our frontline leaders to the frontline people in a big way, and of course the implications from engagement and unionization and all of that. I mean, all of that are linked to this piece. So I think as industry, especially industries like ours, we will see some massive shifts there in terms of how do we make that happen. From other trends perspective, I think the big one is, of course, everyone's working from, anyone's working from anywhere, right? And it's possible. And of course, while there are some, regulatory, tax related issues in terms of from a broad policy perspective, what we're also seeing is, do we really, like, the whole concept of manager is being questioned, right? And I think we are kind of questioning that in terms of saying, what's the role of this, role of a manager now? I think with information tech, and this is just personal thinking around, if you have enough information, do you truly need managers, right? And sort of the whole role of manager. I know there are some models already out there, the Zappos model, where they have these circles of rather than teams, and I think it's called holocracy, and so on and so forth. But I think we will see some really interesting management models altogether, right? And while I know we talk about coaching being a big part of this new management role, I think there will be some innovations there. I don't know what that finally would look like. I don't think coaching solves everything. There's a soul subject matter expertise side of things and so on and so forth. But I think in general, people do need a leadership. Like there is a need to look up to someone. And so I think there'll be interesting models. I mean, I don't know what the future is going to look like, but I definitely know that it's not going to be the model that we kind of followed. So I think that's a very interesting trend that I'm continually trying to think about and maybe even try and see how we can shape or reshape that relationship, right, in the space. And the third piece would be just in general. I think this is not necessarily just COVID, but I think COVID accelerated, which is training versus learning, and the whole idea of you cannot train anyone, you can only learn, right? And I think it's just going to become so critical going forward. Again, as learning leaders, I think our roles are going to be that of what the IT managers were maybe 10 years back when they were trying to put infrastructures in place. And I think learning leaders will actually just land up almost fading away, but basically put solid tech-enabled infrastructures where people will choose their journeys, right? And in a way that, of course, you will have the niche sort of experiential learning and sort of leadership development at very, very specific areas. But in general, I don't think we will, I think we will see learning as an infrastructure, and it's just, it's available whenever I need it, however I know we've been talking about it, but I don't think we have done a lot around that space. I think we will see that accelerate.
Absolutely. I love your perspective on that now, because I think on top of that, they are all sort of linked together. They are strongly related. If you think about, the issue of social learning and learning from others, and the role of managers on that, which is your first mega trend, but then you question and you ask yourself about what is the role of that manager, and the role of them evolving from a sort of transmission of information, right, from in the past, and now being more a support or a coach that it's not a sage on the stage, like we say for the professors, right? It's the guy on the side of their teams, and I think that's passionate, because questioning that questions our role as a support to make the role of manager, the life of manager, really easy when it becomes the issue of developing their own teams, and obviously then it interrogates and questions the whole training versus learning, because learning is something that happens internally. I love your perspective on that. Tell me a little bit, if you come back to the social learning, the connecting part on the, what do you think? I mean, what are sort of experiments or things that you are seeing in the learning space that you believe kind of capture in a nutshell, or illustrate your, your vision of the future of learning?
Yeah, no. So from a, from the context that I'm coming from, so we have a huge amount of frontline folks, and our business model is based on the fact that, our frontline people who are who are close to the customer, and their engagement, their happiness is important to how we deliver customer promise and customer products, right? So at the core of what Amazon does is again, in terms of being able to deliver customer promises based on how happy people are, and how our leaders actually making sure that it's a frustration-free environment for them. I mean, if you think about it, of course, there's a strategy and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's about the front line for us. So going back to your social connection point, what we are seeing as a business need is that with this kind of an environment, with COVID, for example, what can we do differently so that people still make sure that our associates are engaged, and then of course, you could go up in the sense that frontline leaders are engaged, so the higher level leaders are actually making sure that the frontline leaders are engaged. It's a weird environment because everyone's in a threat environment, and there's family, there's all these other considerations. So coming to work is a risk to everyone else, and so on. So from a so the things that we could or can do, I think a lot of it is evolving. The first part is how learning or talent development is helping leaders understand, or at least the approach that we have taken, and we don't know if this is the right or wrong, but I think the approach that we're taking is we're saying, understand some of the fundamental, and for lack of a better word, I would say brain mechanics, like how do we as human beings operate, right? So of course, we're trying to make our leaders understand the science behind relationship, because we believe that these are smart people, smart managers, and they get it. It's just that so far we have tried this in the past, but there wasn't really the need. I think suddenly now people realize, and people are willing to listen to these other external perspectives. So I think we're doing a fair amount of work around just explaining people the science behind I think the relationship. And I think the science part is important because I think people get it in general. And of course you can also almost do like a SOP, of saying, okay, fundamentally, if you do these three things right, chances are that you're gonna do a good job. So yeah, I think that's the first part. Again, I mean, from a learning perspective, it's no more about going and coaching them the way we could or training them the way we could. So everything is being done online or through e-learning type of solutions right now. So I think the heavy focus on education. I think that's a big one that we can do to the frontline folks. But then to sort of top that up is providing them with sort of real life project work, so especially for frontline leaders, we're trying to figure out how can you have coaching discussions with frontline people, with the social distance, basic things like don't talk to them looking at the laptop, try and have a real conversation. Again, nothing new, but I think the whole social distance creates a true physical distance. I mean, there is this distance right now. And our approach has been to educate them, bring a fair amount of science there. Of course, they're being supported with all sorts of learning assets that are out there. But I think we are seeing this need to, again, push them saying, hey, you have to have these conversations with your people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense now. And I was wondering, because you were talking about something that I believe it's really important, is the science approach to it, and the role of data on the future of learning. Uh, what are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing that is really interesting in the use of data, and how do you think that's gonna be in the future for learning?
Yeah, again, I mean, if you, I think if you can collect enough data, like, and I'm talking about like completely, non-politically, right? I mean, if you can collect enough data, you can predict the future, right? I mean, so if you think about it in that sense. Now, of course, that's not the state, but I think what the future of learning specifically, I think what we see is that there are a fair amount of data inputs around performance. There's a fair amount of data inputs around engagement of people. I mean, and these are all anonymized, but you can create trends around them in terms of how many people, for example, want to go back to office, or how many people are happy at this current moment. I mean, there are pulse systems out there that you could get a pulse of every employee almost every day. And again, there's a fair amount of data point that you can use to create trends. I think data with behavioral science, or sort of the nudge science, or behavioral insights, and so on and so forth, is pretty powerful from a learning perspective, because now you can almost nudge people to the right behavior, right? And again, if you think about sort of the choice architecture, or, within the nudge space, I mean, simple nudges, like saying, hey, your social circle is operating in a separate, different way, but you are not. Would you actually want to change anything? And I think just that simple suggestion is big, good enough for people to start changing behaviors. And I think traditionally I hear a lot of my learning leaders saying, hey, that's not learning. They're not changing their long-term behaviors. And my point is, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, if people change, if people take the right steps, even if it's deep inside, they don't completely change their thinking process, but the social pressure or the nudge actually helps them to change their behavior, and that behavior actually gets you business impact, and people are happy with it. I think we're good with that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And that's a great point, because once you change your behavior, then you establish a sort of new habit, right? And that has the tendency to keep in the long
Right,
term as well. So
right. Totally, yeah,
no, I
yeah.
totally agree with you. That's a great point. Let me come back a little bit to the role of manager, because I think I love your take on that. I love the way you positioned that before was, if the frontline employee has all the information, why do we need a manager? You know what I mean? And I love that perspective. And I was thinking from my side on the whole revolution in education with, and I think I mentioned to you before, the teacher becoming, it's not more the sage on the stage, but it's the guide on the side, and the sort of metaphor. And so can you develop a little bit more on what is your vision for the manager in the future, and maybe some examples that you are seeing in the holocracy sort of organizations, and what is going to be your role as a learning leaders in that sort of organizations in the future?
Yeah, no, I think there are a couple of states, right? One is a sort of a future state where, like you said, I mean, where we would have already transformed, and this new role of managers, we probably won't even call them managers anymore, because it doesn't even make sense to call them managers. And frankly, we are actually kind of seeing this already. So you have these very niche skill-based roles, robotics engineers, or really high complex, sort of data scientists, and so on and so forth, where these roles are so niche that your manager would never be able to sort of be the better better than you, like as an employee. So what do you do? Like, how do you manage that sort of skill group? So the fact is that you will no longer be necessarily the manager in the current context, right? So but what you'll essentially have is I believe that the future will be where these people will operate on their own, because they will have enough information, they will know their goals. And again, I mean, the tech now allows you to kind of keep track of your project in ways that we were not able to do before. So we know our goals, where we are, and so on and so forth. So the customer feedback, I mean, it's almost real time. So you can use data and tech to kind of inform people in terms of where they're progressing and how they're progressing. So I don't think you need that controllership element of the manager anymore, right? Or at least in the future state at some point in time. I think there'll be this interesting the phase that we will see is this transition or the transformation phase, where I think learning becomes extremely critical. So one is I believe that we will fundamentally have to have new roles. So to your point, we will probably not have manager roles anymore, but we will have something around the guide role, right? So, and it's a much more I again think that it's a much more broader role. I think technology, technology, business, and people skills are going to be important for this particular person. Like these people should or probably going to have a high tech understanding. So probably from a STEM background, maybe, but at the same time, they need to have a high business understanding, and then they will probably they need to be trained into become very good people. So at least that business, tech, and people skills have to be very well developed in these group of people, so that they are generic enough, but they're not necessarily being in the way of these really specialized people out there, right? So I think that's a kind of orgs that we'll start seeing. And I think the learning organization's role in this transformation would be a lot of people from the current, sort of present will transition into those roles. But I think we'll also see a lot of new roles coming up, to that guide roles, which will be completely bottom up. I mean, there's no transition. And I think again, learning would have to help them navigate that path, getting to the future stage. So I think that once we reach the future stage, whenever it is, and I think different companies or different industries will reach at different point in time. And maybe that's a 10 to 15-year journey, I'm sure. I mean, maybe even longer, depending on the industry. But I think, we do have a lot of our role cut out for us to, help that transition happen.
That's very insightful. Thanks a lot, Nav. Really appreciate that. Maybe one last question on the training versus learning mega trend that you cited before. What exactly is for you this movement, and what sort of actions, concrete examples you were seeing that are taking us to stop just teaching, but making sure that our students or our colleagues are actually learning?
Yeah, so from the data perspective, I think we are clearly seeing learners wanting to take control more and more, right? From a business perspective, I think what you're seeing is help us become more scalable, but also sort of fungible, right? That whole fungibility in terms of, can I move one person from one role to another role? I think the traditional learning models have been very focused on this career path model, right? But unfortunately, I mean, the business reality has completely changed, but somehow the career path model has continued to be there. So I think there are these business realities, as well as people, employee realities are kind of have already sort of moved ahead, but then the career path model continues to be. And I think I understand, because I think as fundamentally human beings, we love the structure, but unfortunately the reality is so unstructured, right? So the best option that we think is, one, learning as a learning organization, we will never be able to support every possible learning skills. The best way to do this is allow the subject matter experts, make it, again, I would heavily go into behavioral sciences here and say, hey, how can I make it easy for you as a subject matter expert to develop content for everyone, not just, and let us as a learning organization provide you the infrastructure, provide you a simple set of tools, and sort of, other periphery elements to make this learning experience amazing, right? We can work with you to create new ways of learning. We provide the learning sciences, but you provide the, the technical science or technical knowledge, right? And then I think the future state is where, again, like I said, I mean, I would love this environment where the learning organization, no one almost talks about learning organization anymore because it's just so embedded in day to day. Like, it doesn't matter where you are, you join. Today we have these really amazing onboarding experiences, but maybe going forward it looks very, very different. Yes, you onboard, but you don't even know that you kind of gotten onboarded because there wasn't really a fun fair element, or maybe that's required. Maybe that's what. And again, I mean, those are I think very company dependent or organization dependent. Like, maybe you want to have this fun fair when people join, but after that, I would think, I know we were talking about learning in the workflow and all of that. I think those are absolutely, I think those are going to be like the table stakes. We as learning leaders have to figure out how do we make that possible going forward. But again, at the end of the day, like I started off with saying, we have to give the learner the control, but in a meaningful way. Not that I'm going to YouTube every time. It's like I have to work backwards from the business, make sure that I'm solving business problem with the kind of content and the infrastructure that I provide. And so that when a learner needs support, they immediately get the support because the infrastructure allows them. And when they don't need, I mean, we're not in their way. We're not asking them, hey, get out of here and do this learning and do that learning and so on and so forth. So we are completely embedded in the, business in a way that, people probably don't kind of know that we exist.
Thank you so much. Now, that's really insightful, very informative indeed. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot for sharing.
No, absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. And as always, love to talk to you. I mean, you are someone I look up to almost every day on LinkedIn. So what new are you posting? So thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you.